All right, guys, what is up? Welcome in. It is GC Live. I am Wes. He is Chris. Wednesday afternoon in the capital city. Going to talk some Gamecock baseball, some Gamecock football recruiting, and maybe, depending on our time, start to dive into our off-season position by position breakdowns. Now that we are out of spring and going into the summer, team just reported to campus. Pretty much the entire roster now on campus. So great time to kind of reassess where things are with each position group, which is also something we've been doing on GamecockCentral.com. But first, let me tell you about our guy, Clint Hammond. You see his name right above our heads every single day on the video version of the show. This show is presented by Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. And as we always tell you, we know you're not in a market. Many of you may not be in the market to buy a home right now. And at some point in your life, though, you may want to. Maybe you want to get into investing in homes. Maybe you want to relocate. Whatever it may be, all we're asking is when you get to that point, or if you were planning for that future point, just give our guy Clint a call. Let him try to earn your business, 803-422-6797. And the great part about Clint is, one, he's going to talk some Gamecock sports with you, but two, he is going to walk you through this entire process and make it very, very easy for you. So shout out to Clint, our longtime presenting sponsor right here on GC Live.
Clint will probably get your thoughts on the baseball search. He's probably got some of his own. We're going to talk about that shortly here. But first, I'll tell you about our friends also at Ferry Chevrolet. FerryChevrolet.com, F-A-I-R-E-Y, FerryChevrolet.com. Been in the game, auto dealership game, since 1926. Clearly doing something right. Can't stay in business that long unless you are. Started right here in the Palmetto State in St. Matthews, now conveniently located in Orangeburg, so convenient to Columbia or Charleston, well worth that trip. But if you want to check them out online first, you can do that at ferrychevrolet.com. Check out their new and used inventory. Check out their vehicle options, financing options. If you prefer the phone, hit them up at 803-937-4531. You've seen them on Gamecock Central. You hear about them here on the show. Same deal as Clint. If you are looking for someone to help you out with a new or used vehicle, just like Clint with mortgage, maybe you're not in the market right now. If you are, just make the folks over at Ferry Chevrolet, fourth generation dealership led by Joseph Ferry. Make them your first call.
No doubt, man. All right, so let's talk Kevin Snow. Let's talk Gamecock baseball. And, here's the thing, Chris. Right now, I would say not that we're in a holding pattern by any means. I think that would be inaccurate, but you're not going to see or hear much publicly in terms of like true, I would say, progression on this thing because of the fact that pretty much, I guess at this point, man, all the public names that we know of, all the names we're tracking are still playing ball right now. So we are still on, I think, the tail end of that, one, information gathering part of the process, and two, the conversations are being had between South Carolina administration and the agents of these coaches, or in some cases, even the search firm is reaching out and gathering information or having discussions. Like a lot of that groundwork can be laid right now before you have the actual true, like, I don't even know if interview is like the proper word. Like, that's very formal. I think that probably depends entirely on that particular AD. Like, some ADs may want to have kind of a formal interview process. I think the more like structure, or the more that a coach has done in his career already, the less to me is it like, do you want Kevin Snow hopping on a Zoom having to like feel like he has to prove himself? I don't think so. I think it's more like you're having a conversation as two adults who have been very successful in what they're doing, and you're trying to find out, is this a fit? Is this a match on both sides for whether that's Kevin Snow or anyone else? So the most newsy thing we've gotten, I would say, in the last 24 to 48 hours, Chris, is these comments from Kevin Snow to Phil Kornblut on Sports Talk Media Network This was last night. And Chris, I was actually I thought Kevin Snow addressed this about as much as you would see a coach address. Like, he very easily could have just said, Phil, come on, man, no comment. You know what I'm saying? Like,
My team. Yeah.
we're not getting into that. And I don't think anybody blinks, right? Everybody's like, oh yeah, and and Phil makes a joke like, yeah, I had to ask, and then that's that. So here's the quote. I know there's a lot of rumors out there, but I have not spoken to the University of South Carolina regarding its baseball head coaching position. All of our focus right now is 100% on Coastal. South Carolina is an elite program. That's a job that's going to obviously be a job that a lot of coaches will be interested in because of the commitment and the rich tradition of that program. But like I said, at this point, I have not spoken to the University of South Carolina regarding that position. So, Snall, and I'm reading this. Again, this is from Phil Kornblut's interview Tuesday evening. Reading this, Jack Veltry's article on our front page. Schnall later mentioned that his agent has spoken to a search firm about the job at South Carolina, but, quote, has got very little information. So, and then Schnall later on goes on to kind of talk more broadly. This is the typical thing you would hear coaches say, it's going to happen every single year. Very fortunate to be a part of this successful program. It's going to happen every single year if we continue to be successful. That's something I feel like that's a go-to for coaches these days. Like, oh man, if we're successful here, people are going to want to hire our coaches away.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there is a little bit. It's a little bit you can glean from this. For one, there's definitely no denial here. There's no, I'm staying at Coastal forever. There's no walking himself into like a Nick Saban situation or a Bobby Petrino situation of, let me say something that could come back to bite me later on. I thought it was a pretty open, pretty honest answer, as Garnet Yardbird says. And then I think that is kind of standard. This is kind of standard fare at this point. Like, the fact that he has not spoken to South Carolina, I don't really think is surprising considering where we are on the calendar right now. If there had been no contact whatsoever between someone in his camp and someone in South Carolina's camp or representing South Carolina's camp, be it the search firm, that would be a little surprising to me and would be a little difficult to believe for me. But the fact that he has not, according to him, sat down with Jeremiah Donati at this point doesn't really mean a heck of a lot of anything to me.
No, the process continues, and there's a lot of pieces and moving parts to this thing. You've got one thing that we heard early, which this is not anything groundbreaking, of course, is that, hey, when this search really gets going, there's going to be a waiting period because the coaches that we being South Carolina, talking to some sources about this, the coaches that we're going after are playing postseason baseball. So you don't want to make this a blanket 100% rule, Wes, but generally those conversations are going to be happening behind the scenes with exactly the players that are described here. An athletic director, his athletic department, their representation, a search firm being involved to kind of keep all of that noise and the things that you have to work through, kind of in a silo until it's time to actually have more of those detailed conversations with the coaches. South Carolina is not starting from just scratch on this thing, in that they do have a list. Kevin Schnall's on it. There are other coaches on it too, right? And I think that's something that's been reiterated to you and I over the course of this process is he's absolutely a guy to watch. Maybe he ends up being the guy, but there are others. This is not just a process where all roads lead to Kevin Schnall. That's not the sense I get. Could it happen? Sure, because he's on the list. He's under consideration and heavy consideration. But South Carolina's starting point, from my understanding, and we don't know everybody on the list, is guys that have a track record, guys that are playing postseason baseball, guys that have strong resumes. So, yes, you're doing a fact-finding mission trying to find the best guy, but it's not like you need to sit down, to your point, and have a 3-hour Zoom with somebody just to figure out if they're even in the mix or not, right? At some point, this thing has to get narrowed down. And everything that's happening right now helps South Carolina with that. They may get information that actually that coach that you have on your list, he's good where he's at. He's not really looking to move. You may find out that coach that's kind of on your dream list that you're sitting there wondering whether or not he's attainable. Actually, he's fighting with his AD a little bit, or his board. He's really open to making a move. You might have those more detailed conversations, get feedback from the search firm, talk to candidates, and find out, you know what, this guy in my mind, if you're Jeremiah Donati, maybe he was kind of, I don't know, number 3. He's moved up to number 1, or vice versa. And so that's why everything that's happening in this process is so important. But you also have the timeline, right? You've got guys playing postseason ball. You've got to keep that in mind. The game, if it gets to it, Game 3 of the College World Series is June 22nd. Transfer portal opens June 1st, runs to June 30th. You can't rush it, right? But there has to be a lot that happens behind the scenes before you get to the point of, let's sit down and have formal interviews or Zooms. Like, I honestly don't know how Jeremiah Donati is handling that. I don't know that we've learned that yet, as far as what is his philosophy on the interview process. Are you narrowing it down and interviewing everybody? How are you handling that? I think that's one of those things we don't quite know yet.
Yeah, and I think this is where it is important, if you are a coach, to have great representation who understands your wants and your needs. And it's important, you as an administration, to be getting great information, to be getting accurate information, and to trust your search firm that you're working with. And this is where a lot of the stuff that would be wasting everybody's time can kind of be eliminated if everybody does their job. If South Carolina if South Carolina's search firm reaches out to the agent of a coach, says, hey, South Carolina wants to talk. Agent says, hey, man, my guy's just not interested at all. Okay, cool. Move on. If South Carolina calls up, the search firm calls up an agent and says, hey, you're one of our top guys, or your guy's one of our top guys, we want to talk, and the agent says, do not make this hire without talking to us. That's how interested we are. That is valuable information. So you do what you do not want, Chris, is a situation like Penn State had, where in football, where it feels like they're getting to their 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th candidate, and then there's reporting that they thought Matt Campbell was not interested and moved on from the idea of him to start with. And then come to find out, oh, wait a second. He actually is interested. So that's where the accuracy, that's where the trust of the people that are representing your interests, I think, is very, very, there was some, reportedly, there was some disconnect there in terms of that information. So that's why those things are incredibly important. I think, man, that's how, and y'all can say what you want about how it ended, but the Frank Martin tenure at South Carolina, you got to go to a Final Four. You got to have probably one of the best men's basketball experiences any South Carolina fan can have, because come to find out, Frank and his AD were not on the same page. Nobody at the time when that opening happened thought that Frank Martin was someone South Carolina was going to be able to go coach. So those things are why you got to communicate and have the people that are looking out for your interests, I think, out there, and all these things happen. So I think we haven't had major big news yet, but there are little details like this that Schnall provided. There are details like the one from Georgia Tech yesterday, Chris, who announced that they have a $2.5 million gift towards scholarships for the baseball program. That would be a $2.5 million match, which would then go up to $5 million. You can see Georgia Tech already making those moves to try and fortify their situation and prove they're serious about baseball. And somebody made a comment on our forum there on Gamecock Central, and I agree. It was worth pointing out. Hey, that's for scholarships. That's not necessarily for NIL. It's not for James Ramsey's salary. It's not for any of those things. However, what that does is it shows, hey, I'm making a commitment to this guy. It maybe, I guess, pushes some other big, heavy pocketed donors to give to that baseball program as well, and just starts that process for Georgia Tech of saying, we're not going to let you, whether you're South Carolina or anyone else, come in and poach our guy without a fight. So I think we're seeing already some schools start to make these moves to build up to what we're going to see them do in the offseason. And I'm sure at Kansas, I'm sure at Coastal Carolina, I'm sure any other number of places where they've had success, those ADs are already starting to have conversations, at least with the agent and maybe with others, maybe directly with the coach about what is it going to take to make you happy enough to stay here.
Yeah, I would venture to say, Wes, that everybody, be it people who have been publicly linked to this job or even are privately linked to the job behind the scenes, everybody's getting a raise out of this, right? And that's not just a South Carolina specific thing. We could be talking about, who LSU or Mississippi State or whoever else that has an opening. That's going to happen. That's just kind of the nature of the beast now. And if you're South Carolina in this fact finding in conjunction with the search firm, as you go through this process, that's one of the things that you're trying to figure out, right? Because we've kind of been, I don't know, man, I think we're getting a little bit out of this phase, but we've been in a stage of the coaching search where it's a lot of agent and media driven talk about the job and who should be in the mix, who makes sense, who is in the mix. And you always see in a coaching search, there's that surge of that type of information. And then it kind of dies down and it starts to come out, well, so-and-so that the media is talking about being in the mix is really not as much in the mix as maybe you thought. But what the net effect is that agent got the coach in the mix publicly for the job, and then he gets that said coach a raise at his new place, right? And look, a lot of these guys, again, the guys that are in the mix for this job, they have track records. They have recent track records. They're doing really good things. They're probably getting a raise anyway, right? But if you're an agent, you're doing your job. Your job is to create the perception or enhance the perception that your guy is a hot commodity, right? That he's wanted. And so they're doing their job from that standpoint. But it's also for us, Wes, locally here, trying to find out who is in the mix, who's going to be the guys that gets closer and closer. We do have to try to parse that and filter it a little bit because we're not making the hire. Fans aren't making the hire. Agents certainly aren't. It's going to be Jeremiah Donati in conjunction with his staff and the search firm figuring out who do they like the most and who's the guy for them.
Yeah, no doubt. Adam Ritter asked, are we surprised about the Josh Gunther transfer already? Would he wait? Are you surprised he didn't wait for a new coach? I'm not surprised at all, man. I think especially when guys transfer in, they've been at a school for 1 year. There's not that just solid base of I've been at that place for 2-3 years. And, there's something about signing with a school out of high school that I think is a little bit different, you're a little bit more connected, and it just didn't work out for several of these guys. So I'm not shocked. I imagine we're going to see a lot more in terms of guys going ahead and transferring out and or at least announcing they're going to transfer, I should say, and putting themselves in a situation to kind of see what's next and let schools go ahead and start deciding if they're going to contact them or recruit them. So nothing with transfers for this baseball team surprises me right now. And I don't really know that you should let it concern you, to be completely honest. There's going to there's going to be mass turnover on this roster, and there has to be. Like there's a reason why South Carolina has a coaching change right now, and they're going to have to go get a lot of new players regardless, man. So I wouldn't really put – there's some guys you want to keep, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't use up much of my personal energy worrying about, who stays or who goes from a roster that produced what South Carolina produced the last 2 seasons. I just wouldn't. So, all right, let's flip, I guess, Chris, to football here, unless you have anything else on coaching search.
Yeah, let's turn the page, man. Talk a little football.
I will say real quick, if y'all want to go check out JC's article, there's some good stuff there on the level of support that the next baseball coach will have, and just kind of fleshing out some things there that we've all kind of talked about or already knew, and some further detail on what we already knew, that hey, this whoever this coach will be, they are going to have the resources needed in place to go win. That will not be an excuse for whoever it is, and we will see where that goes. All right, yeah, football recruiting. Chris, we're still, I guess, let's see, we're a week and some days away from the true June OV push, and actually less than a week away from South Carolina's camp season getting started. So the June rush, very close to being upon us. And that is, I would say, in the recruiting side of things, maybe the most important 3-week stretch of the entire offseason for South Carolina and for everybody else. And so leading into that, you have your May best bets feature for offense and defense up over the last couple of days. So obviously we want you all to go read it and check that out. But I'm going to let you spin the wheel, Chris, and pick a position. Who on the best bets do you want to tell everybody about, and then they can go read the rest of it?
Yeah, well, we split it. Let me lay out some ground rules, if I may. So what I try to do, split it into offense and defense, and then B, try to pick somebody. One thing I'm kind of bad at is, if you ask me for one option, let me give you 3. I just actually did that on Jamie Bradford's show earlier today. I'm like, I got to get better at that. So I try to pick one, while giving the caveat that if someone's listed as the best bet, several guys changed literally in a month's time from April to the May update that I did. And it's not saying this guy will sign with South Carolina. I'm projecting this guy to commit to South Carolina. Kind of just gives you a snapshot of where things stand. I think one that's very interesting to me is running back, right? A lot of people they've got running back on the mind. We know that South Carolina is eyeing 2 in this class from the high school ranks. They already have one, and one that we think is a good one, in Braden Tyson, the 4-star out of Georgia. Who's that second guy? And there are a few options out there, including 2 that have official visits scheduled this month. But I'm looking at Trey Segura. I think, I picked him not because I'm even sitting here saying, well, South Carolina leads right now, because I don't know that I could accurately say that. I think the chances have gone up since earlier this year. I also think that that's the outcome that South Carolina's coaching staff would absolutely love to have in this class. So he's got a full official visit slate. South Carolina gets one this month or this next month in mid-June. And we'll kind of see. There's been a lot of ebbs and flows to that recruitment. I think they're in a better spot than they have been. South Carolina is. But there's a lot of competition. Tennessee is one, for instance. Indiana's in the mix. He took an OV there. It's one you got to try to close out. There are other options, but I really get the sense South Carolina would love to close out the class with him if possible.
Who would have ever thought that Indiana being in the mix would be noteworthy,
Yeah. Well, in the old days, you'd be like, y'all recruiting against Indiana, you need to find somebody else to recruit against. Now it's like, you should probably try to sign that guy. And it's crazy, man. Like, this following it, like, they've done what they've done under Kurt Signetti by not necessarily attracting these. They're not loaded up with 5 stars on that roster, right? But they're starting to attract a higher caliber of prospect as well, which, for the Big Ten, they're probably looking around going, oh, man, this is not great for us.
Yeah, man. Let's dive into Trey here and just the skill set. And, man, I'm not going to get myself in trouble like I did last time we talked about a running back, because it actually is a very different skill set. But just turning on and seeing that Burns blue, that silver and white on the jerseys as well, watching a big time back, certainly brings back some memories here. But Chris, I think when you look at Segura, what stands out to me, dude, is this soccer background here. Like, I feel like we're seeing more and more big time athletes. Look at Lenora Sellers. Look at Joyce Edwards for South Carolina women's basketball. I'm sure many others. But I when we first started doing this, I just don't feel like I ever heard, oh, yeah, that guy, that girl, she also plays soccer. And now I feel like we're hearing that more and more. And I just got to imagine for your footwork, for your ability in space, it's got to be a huge advantage. I mean, you just watch sort of – I like how he makes subtle cuts to get himself where he needs to be within a hole or within, multiple defenders being around him. And he kind of makes that subtle cut and then gets back up to right there too. Back to sort of full speed. And it's kind of a unique running style. I don't know if anybody immediately pops into my mind as being a comparison, but this guy, as you said, Chris, way up the Gamecocks board in terms of priority. I think early on, it was maybe somebody I think you maybe have accurately said this might be a little bit of a long shot for South Carolina. And just gradually over time, and with Stan Drayton coming in, and, with Notre Dame getting 2 backs committed, like, just various things have happened that I think have put South Carolina very much in it. But your thoughts on the film here as kind of his skill set goes?
Yeah, I mean, man, I was thinking back recently, and we first saw this kid when he was in 8th grade, going into his freshman year at Burns at South Carolina's camp. And he stood out physically then. And so he's been on the recruiting radar for a long time. And like I said earlier, and you just alluded to, there's been those ebbs and flows for South Carolina where, you start thinking, okay, this is an in-state running back. Carolina's probably going to be heavily in it. He's got family ties to South Carolina. It just hasn't always been that way for the Gamecocks. And certainly they've had some coaching turnover. Really, as long as they've been recruiting him, he's been dealing with a few different running backs coaches, right? But once Stan Drayton got in, you kind of saw the board for South Carolina stabilize a little bit more, where it's like, here's a few guys they're going after. They ended up landing one in Braden Tyson that they had also been recruiting since 2023, who had dealt with 2 different running backs coaches, 3 different offensive coordinators, but they were able to circle things back with him and get him. And Segura has a few similarities with that, but this is a really, I love the film. He was an you mentioned soccer, not just a soccer player, was an all-state soccer player. If you've ever seen Segura and his build, like, it's impressive, physically, the way that he's built, the lower body. He's got excellent footwork, really good vision. He can run. He checks a lot of the boxes that you're looking for there. So you can see why South Carolina and so many others have been heavily interested in him.
And Chris, from what I understand, a high academic kid as well, in terms of checking those boxes off the field, making sure that those things are handled too. Let's be honest, that's a part of it these days. That should always be a part of it, but I think in some ways, the more you introduce the components of college players making all this money and how do they handle that, and the investment you're making into a player as a school, then the more information I can gather on, do you handle your academics? Do you handle your off the field? Do you make good decisions? All those things I think are factors as well. And just indications I've heard definitely checks those boxes too, which I think is important for South Carolina, not just here, but with, all the prospects that they recruit. So let's talk a little team, man, and maybe start our process of diving into the various position groups. And I'm going to piggyback off of a conversation we just had on the radio yesterday because it is A, top of mind right now, and B, I think you do have a true position battle or two for starting roles. And I don't know if you look at the entirety of the team, short of the thing that Beamer always says, like, hey, everybody is competing and everybody has to you can't go sit on the couch all summer and remain the starter just because you were the starter this spring. We all know that. But everything being equal, how many true position battles for a starting job are there on this team? I really don't know, but I do think at the safety spot beside Peyton Williams, and then potentially at that nickelback spot, those are two roles in the secondary that appear to be up for grabs for South Carolina and that are probably going to continue through the summer and into preseason camp. But before we dive into that, Chris, do you want to tell everybody about our friends at ATSCO?
Let's tell them about them. ATSKO.com, ATSCO.com. They've been around, another one, a common theme, Wes, been around a long time. And if you're an outdoorsman or outdoors woman, you need to check out ATSCO. ATSCO.com, hunting, waterproofing, also have personal care products and products for your pets. They've got zero brand UV control, odor control. They've got special detergents, laundry detergents for hunters. They've got outdoor gear. And then if you're thinking of going camping, for instance, my neighbor going to Alaska, doing some hiking, which I'm jealous of, coming up soon. I said, hey, I got this website you need to check out. Make sure you have the right kind of gear when you're going, checking out the great outdoors. Hunting, waterproofing, personal care stuff like skin protection, odor control, even special shampoos and sunscreens, all available for you at ATSCO. That's ATSKO.com. Check them out.
Yeah, shout out to them and appreciate their support of our show right here on GC Live. All right, like I said, let's dive into it, man. I think you can probably pencil Peyton Williams in as the defensive player of the spring into that starting lineup as a safety. Beside him, Beamer talked about it a few weeks ago at the it was the Charleston kind of garnet and black road trip thing they were doing, and he very much stopped short of saying we have a starter, we have a set starter at that position opposite of Peyton. Now, he did say, look, David Busey, who you talked to this past week, Garnet Trust Hour, Chris, he took a lot of the first team reps, took most of the first team reps this spring, and that would tell you he probably at this exact moment in time would have the leg up. However, the more we hear about guys like Xavier Currents, who I think you can put in that category of just built different. Like some guys are just different, man. He's kind of always had those qualities. I think you saw them more and more when he was a senior in high school, just taking over, taking his game to another level. An alpha, a confident kid, a just massive physical presence, which is something it seems Torian Gray loves at that safety position. We've seen him kind of lean into bigger safeties when they can still move. And I think if you're Busey, if you're anybody else at that safety spot, if you're Kendall Daniels, who also is someone they kind of challenged this spring to kind of play up to what is his potential, Currents will be difficult to hold off, I think, just because of the combination of ability, mindset, the approach he takes. And I think it's more a matter of, can Busey then elevate his game? And also, what does that look like in terms of timing for Currents? Can he take that spot now? Is it week 3? Is it week 10? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that the timing is a great point. You know, the game one starter, It isn't necessarily the game 6 or the game 12 starter. And there's a few spots that category might apply, but I think safety is one. Peyton Williams elevated his game. It seems like the staff really liked the spring he had, and they liked the spring I think that Busey and that Jazavian Currents had at the other spot. But I agree with you. Currents probably going to be hard to keep off the field in year one. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean he plays a role? Does that mean he plays more and more as the season goes on? Does that mean he takes another huge leap over the summer and in preseason camp to where the staff feels like, hey, this is our best guy? I think it's interesting to look back on it, Wes. Gamecocks have 2 DBs who are now NFL players who are really, really good. One just got a ring. They were not starters game 1. Nick Emanwari, Jalen Kilgore, they both became starters because almost immediately in game 1 their freshman year, somebody got injured. And then they came in and kind of never really looked back, right? And so obviously you hope that doesn't happen. You don't want somebody to lose a spot because of injury, but you do have to be ready. You know, we've seen that situation happen in the past. And so all things being equal, if everybody's healthy, he's probably the guy you're looking at of, hey, out of everybody on this team, any position, who can go just take a spot and win a spot where maybe he's not the starter right now. And I think Currents is at the top of that list.
Yeah, because I always think, man, because you do keep bringing that up. They were not a starter game 1, but they were a starter game 2. So of their careers, not just of the season. So yeah, it wasn't immediate, but man, it did not take long. We're talking about like snap 8 of the season, I think, from one of them. And then ironically, I guess Emanwari, I think, had to come out of the game, and Kilgore went in as a freshman and kind of did to him exactly what he did to, whoever he replaced.
RJ Roderick. Yeah.
RJ Roderick. Now, obviously, with Emanwari, it was all right. We got to get Emanwari and Kilgore on the field at the same time, basically. But anyway, definitely will be interested in the timing of how that plays out. And if you're a freshman too, though, if you're Currents, not that there's any reason to think this would happen, but you can't feel like you just earned it in the spring. Like you gotta keep pushing. Like you gotta keep elevating your play and put yourself in a position where these coaches trust you, because man, you look around, it's kind of a veteran defense, dude. Like there's a lot of older players that are going to be out there. And so if you're going to go out there as a true freshman, that's a lot on your plate. That's a lot on your shoulders to go out there and know all these intricacies, especially at safety, which, can literally be the last line of defense in terms of making a 20-yard gain for the opponent or a 50-yard touchdown. So, I think that's a factor here. These staffs, I think we've seen this staff as well. They do lean a little bit more into who's played, who can I trust, who has earned the right to go out there, and I know that they're not going to make a big mental error. 98 out of 100 times, basically.
Yeah. So, well, the other thing you got to factor in is the wild cardness. Is that a word? Of Torian Gray. Like you might look over the roster and say, well, I think so-and-so is the most talented, but he has a track record of doing things that maybe you wouldn't expect and developing guys that maybe you wouldn't expect to be as good as they ultimately turn out to be, even just based on what they've done in the past. And sometimes that's development later in a career. So I think you always have to account for the potential of the Torian Gray bump. So a Peyton Williams in year 5, a David Busey in year 3, playing a guy, Tristan Lewis coming in as a freshman, and we're all sitting there going, oh yeah, this kid's 6'4", he'll probably be a safety. And no, Torian's got him out there at corner. DeMarcus Leach last year hadn't played DB. We're all looking at it going, oh, he's probably a safety. No, he's a corner too. Playing Nick Emanwari, we're all sitting there. You remember your crusade about playing Emanwari at linebacker. Torian's like, no, I'm good. We're gonna keep him at safety. So
What idiot said that?
Still a good idea, but I still want to see what it looks like. I want to see what Jalen Kilgore would look like as a safety. Didn't get to see it. Some people on the staff wanted to see it, actually. But you have to account for that. And so you make a good point about the defense as a whole as an older defense. But if you break it down to just the secondary, okay, you've got Judge Collar and Bakari Swain, 2 fourth-year players, right? You've got Quay Scott's a third-year player as a transfer. Gerald Kilgore is a fifth-year player. Peyton Williams is a fifth-year player. David Busey's a third-year player. And all guys that have played. Even though Busey hasn't been a starter, he's played in 25 games, during his career, mostly on special teams. He started one game. But these are all guys who have experience. They've kind of been there to an extent. And you can't really rule that out because for a staff, they're going to want to know that they can trust the guys in a game. And so oftentimes that means, at least to start the season, sometimes that does mean, hey, you're the older guy. You've been here. Sometimes that gets those guys the nod.
Let's talk about nickel. And I think, I'll just speak for myself. I thought Quashid Scott, he's coming in. He's probably your starter at nickelback. Then you hear, hey, Gerald Kilgore has slid over and is playing some more nickel. And then it seems like this spring he played a lot of nickelback. And, Clayton White, when we had him on, I guess that was the radio on Pro Day, he kind of singled Gerald Kilgore out and was like, hey, this guy's had a really, really good spring and has elevated his game and has put himself in a position to play more. Also, Chris, I think worth having this conversation in the context of Quashid Scott can play safety. Gerald Kilgore can play safety. So if both those guys are among your top 5 players, this has an effect on our conversation we just had at safety. Now, it could just be, hey, we're happy with safety. Let's let these two guys have some actual depth at nickel. And maybe there's some different matchup things you can do there because Kilgore is a little bit bigger, at least in terms of how they're listed, than Quashid Scott is. And kind of match up a little bit like that. I'm not completely forgetting Jaquel Holman, Kelvin Hunter in this mix as well. And Kelvin played a lot of nickel last year. I think I saw him at some safety this spring. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. Unless I'm misremembering.
Yeah, I think Hunter was playing more safety in the spring, but don't quote me on that. Regardless, there's still some young guys in that secondary that maybe we aren't talking about much right now, but could factor in. And so, Chris, Kilgore versus Scott, up in the air, you think?
Yeah, battle to watch. And I think I would go as far as to say if making me pencil somebody in, I've got Gerald Kilgore right now. I think just based on the amount of first-team reps that he took during spring ball. And, in some ways that makes sense. I think when you get a guy out of the portal like Scott, who's played a good bit, he played 650 snaps or something last year for Kentucky and played a lot of that slot corner, like nickel type position, can play safety, like you said. You kind of look at that and go, okay, this is probably their guy. But sitting over there saying, hey, I'm here too. I've been here a while. I've played a good bit of ball for the Gamecocks in this defensive scheme, is Kilgore. And so you got to keep in mind that for Scott, even though he's got talent, got here in January. He's a new transfer. He's playing in a scheme that's different than what Kentucky did defensively. He's learning a new scheme, new techniques, new terminology. And Gerald Kilgore's already kind of got that in his back pocket because even though he's played a lot of safety, right, his brother played nickel. He knows nickel. Like he knows the structure of this defense and what Clayton White and Torian Gray want on the back end of the defense. So I think you can't discount him, number one, because of that. But I also think if you just go if you're trying to source this thing from an intel standpoint, there were a lot of first team reps this spring for Kilgore at nickel. So I think that's one where he could end up winning that job. Or maybe Scott or somebody else, but you're probably looking at Scott as kind of the number 2 possibility. He could end up coming in there and making some waves. And that's why you have summer and preseason camp too, to keep rolling down and seeing what happens.
We're pretty set, at least in terms of us, on thinking Judge and Vicari starters at corner, right? Any pushback on that?
No, not for me.
So it really sounds like DeMarcus Leach for the third spot, for the third corner spot. Like that to me would be not like a shock if someone else just stepped up and won it, but I would categorize that as like, it would be a pretty mild surprise for me if not DeMarcus Leach. You look at the fact, you mentioned it, comes in, didn't play defensive back in high school, we think is a safety. Next thing you know, not only is he playing corner, he is on the field in Atlanta in the Mercedes-Benz Arena, and he is playing against Virginia Tech. Like game one, he is on the field. So it really caught my attention in one of the Sunday teleconferences this year where Beamer basically called out, but in a good way, DeMarcus Leach and Kendall Daniels, and said, these are 2 of our guys that we feel like, paraphrasing here, are going to be a couple of the next big kind of stars in the defensive backfield for South Carolina. So I think if Leach is healthy and does everything he needs to do this summer, you look at him, probably that third guy. In this defense, the third guy at corner does play quite a bit. Like typically it's 2 starters. It's a third guy who rotates kind of among or between both of those spots, as opposed to a direct, left corner, right corner, 2 guys filling in for those 2 spots. And then you have a 4th corner who does play, but plays more sparingly than obviously the starters and more sparingly than the third guy. So, Chris, we discussed this in one of our pieces with JC as well. Cassie Barnes, it appears, is making life difficult on some of the other corners in terms of possibly being that 4th guy. Obviously, Jalewis Solomon was someone South Carolina, with his brief flirtation, we'll say, with the portal, somebody South Carolina wanted to stay. I mean, it's a 4-star kid, great film, beat out Auburn for him finally, and I thought was a huge get at the time, to be just completely frank. And so I think that's one of those developments you cannot predict it right now, but it would be a fantastic development for South Carolina if all of a sudden we heard, hey, the light bulb, so to speak, like the switch has been flipped for a guy like Jalewis Solomon, and he's had a great offseason. That would be something that could change the way we look at some of these things on defense, just because the talent, the upside, the ability is there for this kid.
Yeah, and that's something that Beamer has talked about. I think he was asked pretty recently about what are your concerns coming out of spring, and I think maybe the first thing he brought up, certainly one of the things, was depth in the secondary. They feel like, they need DeMarcus Leach to take that next step. Frankly, Clayton White went on record publicly and said, we need Judge Carr and Vicari Swain to take the next step. And they're the 2 projected starters and have played very well at times for the Gamecocks already. But finding, who are the best 5 in what situation, but also feeling like you've got some additional depth there. And so Leach is one. See what happens with Solomon. I've been impressed by the early returns on Cassie Barnes. I mean, this is a kid that looks like $1 million physically. He's a big corner. He's long. He's put together. He can run. Played some receiver in high school, so he's got the ball skills. He looks okay. That's a Torian Gray, corner. Which apparently there's no limit to the size that he'll allow for a corner. But Cassie Barnes looks like kind of that prototypical long, 6'2" guy for him, and he's done some really good things early as a true freshman. So we'll see how they've continued to progress, throughout summer and preseason, and where all these land in the secondary.
Yeah. All right, Chris. While we were doing the show here, and I firmly realize if someone is watching the show or listening to the show later, this will no longer be news at all whatsoever. But while we're doing that, I still want to talk about it just because it did just happen. And that is the kickoff times are out for the first 3 games of the year for South Carolina. And I'm about to pop them up here, Chris. I don't want you to. Have you looked yet? Don't look yet, Chris.
No, you're going to be showing them to me brand new.
I'm gonna pull these up, and if you're in the chat as well, I want everyone's reactions. Hold on, we're doing this on the fly. Let's see how quick this AT&T fiber can load everything up. Oh, boom, got it. Look at that. Look at this awesome graphic I just whipped up on the fly. Not really.
Man,
This is from our friends Justin King, Zach Frese, all those guys over there at South Carolina football. Stole this graphic. This is the official graphic from their Twitter. So credit to them. But Chris, Kent State, September 5th, 12:45 Eastern on the SEC Network. Towson, September 12th, 7 p.m. SEC Network Plus. And the SEC opener, of course, of Game 3, September 19th, 4:15 p.m. Eastern Time on SEC Network. Your reaction, sir?
Well, the first thing is I'm laughing over here because Jamie Bradford put me on the spot. I did their show earlier this morning, and he had me guess them, and I literally got every single one wrong. So, and I was thought I might do. I don't have any. I had the opener at 7. I had the Towson game as the afternoon window, and then I had Mississippi State as a nooner. So, which would be I guess for that SEC network slot would be 12:45. But yeah, I literally got every single one wrong. I'm 0 for 3. I selfishly, and I don't know why. Mississippi State to me is just like that should be a noon game. I think it reminds me of Jefferson Pilot and Dave Neal, our buddy, or something.
Yeah.
I felt like that had a noon vibe, which I was cool with. I wanted the opener to be a night game just because that seems right to have a night game to open the season at Willie B. But you know what? It's football, and I'm excited about it.
But it also is going to be hotter than, where at 12:45 on September 5th in the capital city, Columbia, South Carolina at Williams-Brice Stadium. So
it probably will be, yeah.
I would have been okay, frankly, with avoiding that. Although, Chris, I would not complain about the weather. I'm not a weather complainer.
I will be checking throughout this season and make sure.
But 12:45 set for the opener, it is giving me vibes of Coastal Carolina.
No.
Early Muschamp era.
Oh.
I watched that game from the upper west stands, and I mean that might be one of the most top 5 sports viewing, most miserable, hottest. Just it was terrible.
It was 400% humidity.
Yeah, hopefully.
Dude, they kept every 2 minutes. Unfortunately, they were coming over the PA doctor number, because people were it was so humid and hot.
Yeah, it was. So here's where I am though. Towson, 7:00. I kind of love that. Great family game. I feel like a game South Carolina should also win.
No disrespect to the Tigers.
Yeah, disrespect intended. If you it's a game to take, maybe if you don't have super young kids, but it'll be cooler at night. It's a game you should win. Tickets will be easier to get. Like don't mind that at all. And I actually, as I've gotten older, have come to appreciate the 4:15er because you get some of the best elements of an early game and some of the best elements of a night game all baked into one. So I have no qualms with the 4:15 SEC opener. Although last time South Carolina played Mississippi State, David Leggett game, Spencer Rattler game, that game, it was definitely dark out. That was a night game, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was.
So
yeah.
that one was not Jefferson Pilot Sports.
It was not. It was not. Yeah, Dave Neal's like, I got that one if it's on JP Sports and it's Mississippi State in the Gamecocks. Oh no, I'm sorry, Garnet Yardbird. That's terrible. We're messing people's plans up. Y'all, I tried to be completely clear. You can take my guidance on some things. You should not have taken it on those. But I'm with you. I like the 4:15 game. You can also finish the game, and depending on where you're going next, you can go catch some action on the night games, So always fun.
Chris, do you see this comment?
I see it.
Is this the Tony Rice?
Oh, that'd be something.
College football legend, Tony Rice. Says we are not talking about Tristan Lewis enough, and I'll take that feedback, Tony. I think that's someone. Here's my question about Tristan. It has nothing to do with the ability at all. I think for him, it's a little bit like, with DeMarcus Leach making that transition to playing a new position. How quickly does he make that transition? Like, I think he's another one Chris and I saw at camp, and just physically, dude, is incredible, right? Like, looks 100% the part of SEC defensive back, and the fact they have him playing at corner, I think speaks to what Torian Gray believes about his athletic ability. Because if you look at him physically, this is a safety body. Like, this dude is long, tall, just physically put together. I thought it was pretty interesting at the Shrine Bowl practice this past season. I go out there. Chris, you didn't join me this year, I don't think. Currents is out there. Tristan is out there. Caden Ramsey, who's going to play tight end for South Carolina, was out there playing DB. And they're all standing beside each other in the secondary. And I was actually with Charles Power, who does all the rankings for On 3. And we were just like, man, those are three good-looking prospects. And, Currents, borderline 5-star. The other two were not, like, highly rated. But you watch them move, and you watch you watch them move at their size, and you're going, man, these are the type of guys recruiting the state of South Carolina, if you're the Gamecocks, that you need to land, I think. So, yeah, I'm with you. My thing with Tristan is just how quickly does it come along. If he makes that quick transition, then yeah, he will find the field sooner rather than later. But I think from a just talent and overall ability standpoint, he is what you're looking for. And I like the quarterback background. I like the ability as a pitcher as well. Like, he's kind of a multifaceted athlete and has some physicality to him. Definitely a lot to like about Tristan long term.
Yeah, and we definitely should have mentioned him in that conversation. I'll give a little defense in that we've written a lot of pretty good things about Tristan on Gamecock Central, that being, reporting that he was working at corner, and then why the staff has liked him so far. He's got great ability in terms of the size. He's fearless. We did a story with Chris Liner as head coach there, and Chris has been around Greenwood a long time, coach has, and as an assistant back in the day, he's seen, Josh Norman and Swearinger and Armani Edwards. And he's like, this guy might have more raw ability than any of them. And that caught my attention, somebody who's not like, he literally has been around those guys. So yeah, definitely one to watch, I think. And even if not in the short term, like game one or this season, for the long term, I think.
Yeah, I'm just caught up on if that's former Notre Dame quarterback Tony Rice from the state of South Carolina. So, Tony, don't leave us hanging, man. Let us know. Is that you?
How to give an answer? Yeah.
If it is, you're the man. One of the best athletes to ever come out of the state of South Carolina. So, shout out to you, man. All right, Chris, that's an hour right there. Let's get out of here. And I think we hit all of our great sponsors. But if you're not a member of Gamecock Central, come hang out with us. GamecockCentral.com. 3 months for $1 sale going on. That will get you into preseason camp. And then hopefully at that point, you want to stick around and hang out with us for the rest of the season. He is Chris. I am Wes. We've enjoyed it. Y'all have a good one, and we will talk.